If I think back to my early days of when I started learning Japanese through AJET, and many of you guys can certainly relate to this right now if you're in this spot, I knew that when I was immersing that I was learning, that I was supposedly gaining some kind of knowledge or getting better at Japanese, but I literally never had anything to show for it, and I felt like I wasn't actually going anywhere or making progress at all. Now, it's no secret that the first 3 or so months of learning Japanese through immersion are going to suck because, well, you're not really sure if this whole AJAT or immersion thing works at all, but why not give it a try and see? However, at the same time, since the day I started learning Japanese, I was using a time tracker website called Polylogger to log all of my Aki time, listening time, and basically everything else I was doing. Now, I didn't really realize it at the time, but without this, I would have never stuck to AJET and continued to go on. Basically, tracking my time was a way for me to look back on my day and think, damn, I might have not really understood much, but at least I put in 4 hours and I could see my time stacking up. So in other words, that feeling of progress, even if it didn't really show, was basically carrying me through the period where everything was just super difficult. So you might have just heard all that and thought, all right, this is great, thanks, I'm gonna click off. But there's a whole separate side to tracking your time that a lot of people overlook. You see, as I started to get a little bit better and as I could understand more of my immersion, it kind of became a game of me being obsessed with just trying to hit that time goal and forcing myself to sit there. Now, the problem with this is that even though I was supposedly spending my time immersing, my time was actually barely worth anything because I'd just be spacing out while kind of deluding myself that I was actually making progress, when in fact, my attention was so scattered and all over the place that I was literally just wasting my time. Now, surely what I just described doesn't apply to everyone, and I can already predict the comments of people disagreeing with me, but in this video, I'm just going to talk more in depth about why it might be a good idea to track your time if you're not, how to do it efficiently so you can enjoy immersion instead of chasing your hours, and if and when you should stop worrying about tracking your time. I also just want to point out that this video isn't about why you shouldn't track your time or that it's bad. I just want you to know that you shouldn't be dependent on tracking your time, and you shouldn't have your goal to be chasing a number on the screen. Like I mentioned at the start of this video, if you're kind of in that rut at the beginning of AJAT where it's like everything is too hard for you or you just don't understand anything and it's all discipline at the start, tracking your time is going to be a godsend because even if you don't feel like you're achieving anything through your immersion, just having those hours and seeing that you're actually putting in the effort kind of makes everything feel more like a game and that it's something that you can make progress to if you're willing to work on it. Even looking back on my own experience, I would just kind of sit down and watch anime with Japanese subs at the start, and it would take me about 90 minutes just to finish one episode because I would be sitting there and I would pause on every single subtitle and try to figure it out. You know, maybe ask ChatGPT if I didn't understand something in the grammar. But especially for those first 3 months, like I said, I really didn't feel like I was going anywhere, and I wanted to quit a lot. But just seeing that like, oh, okay, I've already invested this much time, right? I'm going to keep going and I'm not going to stop because I've already put effort into this. That mindset is exactly what led me to not quit. And even recently, I was talking to a few guys in my Discord server who are fairly new to AJATting, and they said similar things about how even if they struggle a ton, logging those hours to them feels like a huge accomplishment and keeps them really disciplined. Sometimes just gamifying the process at the start is going to help you build that foundation so that you don't quit because, the worst thing you can do is honestly just quit. So tracking your time sounds amazing, right? Why wouldn't you do it? But like I mentioned at the start, doing it too much or being way too focused on the numbers isn't actually going to benefit you all that much. If I remember back to like November 2023, December 2023, I would only focus on trying to track the time in my immersion, and I really wasn't enjoying it that much, right? Like I would kind of sit down and like try to figure it out, but I would have the timer going and then I would finish the episode, go to Polylogger, and then just put in the time, and then I would feel like I accomplished something, right? Like you see there's 3 hours logged on the screen for my immersion time, but looking back, I was barely making any progress because I was way too obsessed on just hitting that goal to the point where I would just sit through the immersion and just like be on my phone or something and not even care about it at all, but I would just be kind of coping and putting in the hours like, oh look, I did the work. And yeah, obviously not everyone is like this, but if you're someone who can relate to that, or like, they're prone to just kind of being on their phone while they're supposed to be immersing, or when they want to lock in but they're just on their phone, especially if you're someone who kind of likes the illusion of feeling like you're making progress, even if it means you're not, then something I can recommend to you is just try to set a goal a little under your capacity and exceed it. So what I mean by this is if you know that you usually do 4 hours of active immersion a day, then if you're going to be tracking your time, just set your goal for 3 hours. And then after that, immerse in whatever you want and don't worry about tracking it, right? Just have fun. Don't worry about tracking it, because if you set that goal to only hit 3 hours a day, it's like, okay, I can track it and I just got to make sure I hit that 3 hours. And after that, I can immerse it whatever I want and it doesn't really matter. then it's going to be a lot better for you and your gains. Basically, by setting that slightly lower target, right, 3 hours out of the intended 4, you kind of create like a buffer, and that kind of lets you meet your official kind of time goal without the pressure to monitor, every single minute, and then you can free up the last hour to enjoy it without having to hit an arbitrary number. So why do I think this works? Once you've kind of hit that goal, right, you already know that you've put in the solid effort, and then after that, you can kind of just, ease your mind, relax. That final hour, like I said, it'll be kind of like a bonus where you're still immersing, but with less pressure, which is going to lead to you acquiring more language. Because if you're not enjoying it, if you're not focused, if you're not creating memorable experiences, you're going to have a much harder time actually acquiring the language and making real progress. Now, as for tracking, you also don't need like a super complicated tracking setup. This is kind of a separate topic and could be a video of its own, but so many people I see spend a lot of time trying to get like the perfect setup or like the perfect like mining setup or whatever, and they don't actually spend that time focused on the language. They just care about, having the perfect setup with all their fancy tools and Anki cards. So specifically for that reason, I chose to use Polylogger when I was tracking my time. I know Refold has an app now. I haven't really used it, but I do have it downloaded. And I just started recently using a website called Natively with the guys in my Discord server, which is kind of nice because we can see each other's progress. We can see, what books we've been reading, what shows we've been doing, how many episodes everyone's watched, and it just kind of keeps each other in check. Now, if you watched this far, I just kind of want to reiterate again, this video isn't about avoiding tracking time. It's just about not being dependent on it and not chasing that number when you could, just be chasing the actual result of learning Japanese. Generally, if you're kind of like me and you don't really want to track your time, but you've heard you just listened to this video of me saying how it'll keep you motivated if you can't really understand anything, then generally around the time where I stopped is where I didn't really need motivation anymore to do AJAT. It was around the time where I had already kind of built my habits and was getting a lot more discipline that I just stopped using it naturally, and I was just able to immerse consistently and have fun doing it. And really, it all just comes down to having the good routine and that kind of stuff. And once you have that, it just gets so easy. Now, of course, tracking is not terrible. You can track for fun, but like I said, if you're like me and tracking kind of hurts your progress because you're too focused on just hitting those numbers, then yeah, you can always stop whenever you want. So to sum up, if you're not already tracking and you're in the beginner stages of learning Japanese and you can't understand anything yet, you're not really motivated and you're not really disciplined either, then I highly recommend tracking because it's going to keep you motivated. It's going to help you build that discipline, but do not become reliant on tracking and do not become reliant on hitting those numbers. More specifically, hitting those numbers for pleasure instead of, just trying to enjoy the content. As always, thank you for watching this far into the video. If you want to join the Discord server, it's $1 on Patreon. Link is in the description. And yeah, with all that said, I hope you got some value out of this, and それじゃまたね。